The afternoon sun came through the tall glass windows of King's Cross Station in London. It was a Thursday, just like any other Thursday. Thousands of people walked through the station. Some were running to catch their trains. Others were standing still, looking at the big screens that showed the train times. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone was busy. The station was full of noise. There were announcements coming from the speakers. There were wheels rolling on the hard floor. There were children crying and adults talking on their phones. It was the kind of noise that became like silence after a while. People stopped hearing it because it was always there. Near Platform 3, there was something different. There was a piano. It was a black upright piano, and it had been placed there for anyone to play. The station had put it there a few years ago. They wanted to bring some joy to the busy travelers. Sometimes, someone would sit down and play a few notes. Sometimes, a real musician would stop by and play something beautiful. But most of the time, the piano just sat there, waiting. On this particular Thursday, a young man was sitting at the piano. His name was James. He was 23 years old, and he worked at a coffee shop inside the station. His shift had just ended, and he had 30 minutes before his train home, so he decided to play a little. James was not a professional pianist. He had learned to play when he was a child. His mother had made him take lessons for 5 years. He could play some popular songs. He could play a few classical pieces, but he was not great. He was just okay. Still, he enjoyed it. Playing the piano made him feel calm. He started to play a simple song. It was a pop song that everyone knew. A few people stopped to listen for a moment. Then they moved on. That was normal. People were always in a hurry. While James played, an old woman walked slowly through the station. Her name was Elena, but nobody in the station knew that. Nobody knew anything about her. She was just another face in the crowd, just another stranger passing through. Elena was 78 years old. She had white hair that was pulled back in a simple bun. She wore a gray cardigan that was old but clean. Her shoes were comfortable and flat. She carried a small shopping bag in one hand. Inside the bag were some vegetables and a loaf of bread. She had just come from the market. Elena walked slowly because her legs were not as strong as they used to be. She had lived a long life, and her body showed it. But her eyes were still bright. They were dark brown, almost black, and they noticed everything. As she walked through the station, she heard something. It was music. Piano music. She stopped walking. Her head turned toward the sound. She saw the young man sitting at the piano near Platform 3. She saw his fingers moving over the keys. She heard the simple melody he was playing. Something happened inside Elena's chest. It was a feeling she had not felt in a very long time. It was like a door opening. A door she had kept closed for many, many years. She started walking toward the piano. Her steps were slow but steady. Her eyes never left the instrument. It was as if the piano was calling her, as if it was an old friend she had not seen in decades. When she reached the piano, she stopped a few feet away. She stood there and watched James play. He did not notice her at first. He was focused on the keys. He was trying to remember the next part of the song. Elena watched his hands. She saw that he had good hands for piano, long fingers, flexible wrists, but she also saw that he had not been trained properly. His posture was wrong. His technique was weak. He was playing from memory, not from feeling. She did not judge him. She understood. Not everyone had the chance to learn properly. Not everyone had the time or the money. Music was a gift, and this young man was doing his best to enjoy it. James finished his song. A few people clapped politely. He smiled and nodded at them. Then he noticed the old woman standing nearby. She was looking at him with a strange expression. It was not unfriendly. It was something else. Something he could not understand. "That was nice," Elena said. Her voice was soft and had a slight accent. It was an accent that James could not place. Maybe Eastern European, maybe Russian. He was not sure. "Thank you," James said. He felt a little awkward. Most people just walked by. They did not stop to talk. "Do you play often?" Elena asked. "Sometimes," James said. "When I have time. I work at the coffee shop over there." He pointed toward the shop. Elena nodded. She looked at the piano. Her eyes moved over the keys slowly, like she was reading words in a book. "It is a good piano," she said quietly. "Not perfect, but good." James was not sure what to say. He did not know much about pianos. He just knew how to play one. A little bit. Do you play? He asked. It seemed like the polite thing to say. Elena smiled. It was a small smile, but it changed her whole face. For a moment, she did not look like a tired old woman. She looked like someone with a secret. I used to, she said. A long time ago. What kind of music did you play? Elena was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be thinking. Or maybe she was remembering. Classical, she finally said. Mostly classical. James nodded. He did not know much about classical music. He knew the famous names. Mozart, Beethoven, Bach. But he had never really listened to their music carefully. It seemed too complicated for him. Too serious. That's cool, he said. I never really learned classical. Just pop songs and stuff. Elena nodded. She did not seem disappointed. She did not seem like she was judging him. She just seemed thoughtful. Pop songs are good too, she said. Music is music. It all comes from the same place. Where's that? James asked. Elena put her hand on her chest, over her heart. Here, she said. It comes from here. James smiled. He liked this old woman. She was strange, but in a nice way. She seemed wise. She seemed like she had lived a life full of stories. The station continued to buzz around them. People rushed past. Trains came and went. Announcements echoed through the air. But near the piano, there was a small moment of peace. Two strangers, connected by music, talking about something that mattered. Elena looked at the piano again. Her fingers twitched slightly. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but it was there. Her body remembered something that her mind had tried to forget. Would you play something else? She asked James. Before you go? James looked at his watch. He still had 20 minutes. Sure, he said. What would you like to hear? Elena thought about it. There were so many pieces she could ask for, so many memories attached to different songs, but she knew what she wanted. She had known the moment she heard the piano from across the station. Do you know any Chopin? She asked. James shook his head. Sorry, I don't really know classical stuff. Is Chopin the guy with the wigs? Elena laughed softly. No, that was many of them. Chopin was Polish. He wrote the most beautiful piano music in the world. Sounds fancy, James said. It is, Elena agreed. It is very fancy, and very difficult. She paused. The next words came slowly, like they were hard to say. There is one piece, she said. The Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It is perhaps the most beautiful thing ever written for piano. James raised his eyebrows. And you want me to play it? Elena smiled again. That same mysterious smile. No, she said. I do not think you can play it. Almost nobody can play it properly. James felt a little embarrassed. But he also knew she was right. He could not play something he had never heard. Then why did you ask about Chopin? He said. Elena looked at the piano bench. She looked at the black and white keys. She took a deep breath. I was just wondering, she said softly, if I still remember how. James looked at the old woman with confusion. He did not understand what she meant. Did she want to play the piano? This small, frail grandmother with the shopping bag and the worn cardigan? Wait, he said. Are you saying you can play this Chopin piece? Elena did not answer right away. She was still looking at the piano. Her eyes had a faraway look in them, like she was seeing something that was not there, like she was looking through time itself. I could, she finally said. Once, many years ago. James stood up from the piano bench. He did not know why he did it. It just felt like the right thing to do, like he was supposed to give her space. Do you want to try? He asked. You can sit down if you want. Elena looked at him. Her dark eyes were filled with something complicated. Fear, maybe, or hope, or both at the same time. I have not played in 40 years, she said. My hands are old now. My fingers are stiff. I do not know if they still work the way they used to. 40 years, James repeated. He could not imagine not doing something for 40 years. He was only 23. 40 years was almost 2 of his lifetimes. Yes, Elena said. 40 years. That is a very long time. Why did you stop? James asked. Then he quickly added, Sorry. You don't have to tell me. That's probably personal. Elena shook her head. It is okay. It is a fair question. She was quiet for a moment. Around them, The station continued its endless movement. People walked past without looking at them. Nobody cared about two strangers talking by a piano. Nobody knew that something important was happening. I stopped because I had to, Elena said. Life changed. Everything changed. And the piano became too painful. James did not know what to say. He could tell that there was a big story behind her words, a story full of sadness and loss. But he did not want to push. He did not want to make her uncomfortable. I'm sorry, he said simply. Elena smiled at him. It was a kind smile, a grateful smile. You are a nice young man, she said. Thank you for listening to an old woman talk about the past. No problem, James said. I like listening. Most people don't really talk to strangers anymore. Everyone is always on their phones. Elena nodded. Yes, I have noticed that. The world has changed so much. When I was young, people talked to each other all the time. On trains, in stations, in shops. Now everyone is alone, even when they are surrounded by others. That's true, James said. He had never thought about it that way before. But she was right. They stood there for a moment, not speaking. The piano waited between them. It was like a bridge connecting two different worlds, two different generations, two different lives. Finally, Elena made a decision. James could see it in her face. Something shifted. Something became firm and certain. I would like to try, she said, if you do not mind. Of course, James said. He stepped back from the bench. Go ahead. It's all yours. Elena took a deep breath. She set her shopping bag down on the floor beside the bench. Then she looked at the piano one more time. She was nervous. James could see her hands trembling slightly. Take your time, he said gently. Elena nodded. Then, slowly, she sat down on the bench. She adjusted her position. She moved forward a little, then back. She was finding the right distance from the keys, the right height, the right balance. James watched her with curiosity. He noticed that her movements were careful and precise. She was not just sitting down randomly. She was preparing, like an athlete before a race, like a soldier before a battle. A few people nearby noticed the old woman sitting at the piano. Some of them smirked. One young woman elbowed her friend and pointed. They were expecting something funny. An old grandmother trying to play piano? This would be entertaining. Someone pulled out their phone. They started recording. They wanted to capture the moment. Maybe it would be funny enough to post online. Maybe it would get some likes and comments. Elena did not notice any of this. She was focused entirely on the piano. She placed her hands above the keys. She did not touch them yet. She just held her hands there, hovering in the air. James saw that her hands were old. The skin was thin and spotted with age. The fingers were bent slightly from years of use. But there was something else too. Something he could not explain. Her hands looked experienced, like they knew secrets that younger hands could never understand. Elena closed her eyes. She was breathing slowly and deeply. In and out. In and out. She was calming herself. She was preparing her mind. The people with their phones waited. The smirks stayed on their faces. They were ready to laugh, ready to share a funny video of an old woman failing at something. But James felt something different. He did not know why, but he felt like he should pay attention, like something important was about to happen, like this moment mattered more than anyone realized. Elena opened her eyes. She looked at the keys one more time. Then she lowered her fingers. The first note filled the air. It was a single note. Just one. But it was perfect. It rang through the station like a bell. Clear and pure and beautiful. Then came the second note. And the third. And the fourth. Elena was playing. The piece started slowly. It was gentle and sad. The notes floated through the air like leaves falling from a tree. There was something deeply emotional about the sound, something that reached inside your chest and touched your heart. James felt his mouth fall open. This was not what he expected. This was not some grandmother playing a simple tune. This was something else entirely. This was real music, professional music, concert hall music. The people who had been smirking stopped smirking. The young woman who had elbowed her friend was now standing completely still. Her phone was still recording, but she had forgotten about it. She was just watching, just listening. Elena's fingers moved over the keys with a grace that seemed impossible. How could hands so old move so smoothly? How could someone who had not played in 40 years remember every single note? But she did remember. Her fingers remembered. Her muscles remembered. Her heart remembered. The music grew more complex. The melody twisted and turned. It rose and fell like waves in the ocean. There were moments of darkness and moments of light. There were moments of despair and moments of hope. More people started to notice. A man who was rushing to catch his train stopped in his tracks. A mother holding her child's hand paused to listen. A businessman in an expensive suit looked up from his phone for the first time in hours. The crowd around the piano began to grow. One person, then 5, then 10, then 20. They all felt it. They all heard it. This was not ordinary. This was special. Elena did not see the crowd. Her eyes were half closed now. She was lost in the music. She was somewhere else. Somewhere far away from this train station. Far away from London. Far away from the present. She was remembering. She was going back. Her fingers danced over the keys. They flew up and down. They pressed hard and soft. They created sounds that seemed impossible for one person to make. It was like an entire orchestra was playing, not just one old woman on an old piano. James felt tears forming in his eyes. He did not know why. He did not know this piece. He did not know classical music. But something about the sound was speaking to him, speaking in a language that did not need words. The station had become quiet. The usual noise was still there. The announcements, the footsteps, the wheels. But it all seemed distant now, muffled, like the world had turned down its volume to let the music be heard. Elena played on. Her whole body moved with the music. She swayed gently on the bench. Her head nodded with the rhythm. She was not just playing the notes. She was feeling them, living them, breathing them. The young woman who had been ready to laugh was now crying. She did not even know she was crying until she felt the tears on her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed. But more tears came. She was not alone. All around the piano, people were feeling things they did not expect to feel. Sadness, joy, loss, hope, all mixed together, all coming from the music. This was what Chopin had wanted. This was why he had written this piece almost 200 years ago. He wanted to make people feel. He wanted to reach into their souls and shake them awake. And Elena was delivering his message. After 40 years of silence, she was speaking again. Through her fingers, through the keys, through the beautiful, impossible music that filled the station. The crowd continued to grow. People were coming from all over the station now. They were following the sound. They wanted to see who was making this magic. They wanted to understand how something so beautiful could exist in a place so ordinary. And at the center of it all sat Elena, the small old woman with the worn cardigan and the shopping bag of vegetables. The stranger that nobody had noticed before. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just another face in the crowd. She was something else entirely. And the crowd was not ready for what would happen next. The music grew stronger. Elena's fingers moved faster now. The soft, sad beginning of the piece had transformed into something more powerful. The notes were coming quicker. The rhythm was building. The emotion was rising like a wave preparing to crash. James could not believe what he was seeing. He had played piano for years. He knew how difficult it was to move your fingers that fast. He knew how much practice it took to make music sound so smooth. And this woman, this grandmother who had not touched a piano in 40 years, was playing like she had never stopped. The crowd around the piano had grown to almost 50 people now. They stood in a circle, 3 rows deep. Some were recording with their phones. Others were just watching with wide eyes and open mouths. A few had sat down on the station floor because their legs felt weak. Nobody was laughing anymore. Nobody was smirking. The jokes they had prepared were forgotten. All they could do was listen. A man named Robert stood near the front of the crowd. He was 45 years old, and he worked as a music teacher at a school in North London. He had been walking through the station on his way home when he heard the first notes of the Ballade. At first, he thought it was a recording. He thought someone was playing music through speakers, because no one plays Chopin in train stations, especially not Chopin's Ballade No. 1. That piece was too difficult, too complex, too demanding. But as he got closer, he realized the truth. It was not a recording. It was real. A real person was playing this impossible piece on a public piano in the middle of King's Cross Station. Robert pushed his way to the front of the crowd. He needed to see who was playing. He needed to understand what was happening. When he saw Elena, he felt his heart skip a beat. She was old. So old. Her white hair was pulled back in a simple bun. Her cardigan was worn and faded. She looked like someone's grandmother, someone who baked cookies and told stories about the old days. But her hands told a different story. Her hands were moving like lightning across the keys. They were hitting every note perfectly. They were creating music that Robert had only heard on professional recordings. Music that took years of training at the best conservatories in the world. This is impossible, Robert whispered to himself. This is absolutely impossible. The woman next to him heard his words. She leaned over and asked, "Is this piece really that hard?" Robert nodded slowly. He could not take his eyes off Elena's hands. "This is one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano," he said. "I've been teaching music for 20 years. I've met maybe 2 or 3 people in my entire life who could play it like this." The woman's eyes grew wide. She looked back at Elena with new respect, new wonder. "Who do you think she is?" she asked. Robert shook his head. "I have no idea. But she's not just some random person. She's been trained, professionally trained, at the highest level." The news began to spread through the crowd. Whispers passed from person to person. The words "professional" and "concert pianist" floated through the air. People started to realize that they were witnessing something special, something rare, something they might never see again. Elena did not hear any of this. She was lost in the music. She was traveling through time. As her fingers moved over the keys, memories came flooding back. Memories she had buried for so long. Memories that hurt too much to remember. She remembered her first piano lesson. She was 4 years old, living in a small apartment in Warsaw, Poland. Her mother had saved money for months to buy an old piano. It was ugly and out of tune, but to little Elena, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. She remembered her teacher, Mr. Kowalski. He was a strict old man with white hair and kind eyes. He made her practice scales for hours. He made her repeat the same passage dozens of times until it was perfect. She had hated him sometimes, but she had also loved him. He had given her a gift that would last a lifetime. She remembered her first concert. She was 12 years old. She played at a small theater in Warsaw. Her hands were shaking so badly that she thought she would forget everything. But once she started playing, the fear went away. The music took over. And when she finished, the audience stood up and clapped for 5 whole minutes. The memories kept coming. They flowed through her like the music, like water breaking through a dam. She remembered winning competitions. She remembered playing in famous concert halls across Europe. She remembered the faces of audiences who were moved to tears by her music. She remembered the reviews in newspapers that called her a genius, a prodigy, a gift from God. But she also remembered the darker times. She remembered the war, the fear, the running, the hiding. She remembered losing everything she had worked for, her career, her reputation, her home. She remembered coming to London with nothing but a small suitcase and a broken heart. She remembered starting over, getting a job as a cleaning woman, living in a tiny room, pretending to be nobody special, hiding who she really was. And she remembered the day she decided to stop playing, the day she closed the lid on her piano and never opened it again, the day she told herself that part of her life was over. 40 years. 40 years of silence. 40 years of pretending that the music did not matter anymore. But it did matter. It had always mattered. And now, sitting at this public piano in a busy train station, Elena finally understood that she could not run from who she was. The music was part of her. It lived in her blood, in her bones, in her soul. The piece was reaching its most complex section now. The notes were coming in cascades. They tumbled over each other like a waterfall. Elena's right hand was flying up and down the keyboard while her left hand provided a deep, powerful foundation. The crowd had grown to almost 100 people. Some were standing on benches to see over the others. Some were holding their children on their shoulders. A few station workers had stopped their duties to watch. Near the back of the crowd, a young woman named Sarah was recording everything on her phone. She worked for a news website, and she had been at the station to interview someone about train delays. But this was far more interesting than train delays. This was a story. A real story. Sarah pushed her way closer to the piano. She wanted to get a better angle. She wanted to capture Elena's face, her hands, Her expression. She wanted people to see what she was seeing. When Sarah finally got close enough, she gasped. Elena's face was covered in tears. The old woman was crying as she played, but she was not sad. Or maybe she was. Maybe she was feeling everything at once. Joy and sadness and pain and relief, all mixed together. Sarah kept recording. She knew that this video would be watched by thousands of people, maybe millions. There was something magical happening here, something that went beyond entertainment, something that touched the deepest parts of the human heart. Robert, the music teacher, was crying too. He had tried to hold back his tears, but he could not. The music was too beautiful, too powerful, too real. He had heard this piece many times. He had listened to recordings by the greatest pianists in the world, but none of them had sounded like this. None of them had played with this much emotion, this much truth, this much soul. Whoever this woman was, she was not just technically skilled. She was an artist in the truest sense of the word. She was using the piano to tell a story. Her story, a story of loss and survival, and hope. The station had become completely still. The usual chaos had stopped. People who were supposed to catch trains let them leave without them. People who were in a hurry forgot what they were hurrying for. Everyone just stood and listened. Even the announcement seemed quieter. Even the noise of the city outside seemed to fade away. There was only the music. Only Elena. Only this moment. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, squeezed through the crowd to the front. His mother tried to pull him back, but he was determined. He wanted to see the piano lady up close. When he reached the front, he stopped and stared. His eyes were huge. His mouth was open. He had never heard anything like this before. He did not know music could sound like this. He did not know that a piano could make him feel so many things. His mother finally reached him and put her hands on his shoulders. She was going to pull him away. But then she heard the music too. And she stopped. And she stayed. Mother and son stood together, watching Elena play. The boy reached up and took his mother's hand. She squeezed it gently. They did not speak. They did not need to. The music was saying everything that needed to be said. Elena's eyes were still closed. Tears still ran down her wrinkled cheeks, but her hands never stopped. They knew where to go. They remembered every note, every chord, every passage, and the crowd kept growing. More and more people came. They were drawn by something they could not explain, something bigger than themselves, something that made them feel alive. They did not know who Elena was. They did not know her story, but they could feel it. They could feel 40 years of silence being broken. They could feel a lifetime of pain being transformed into beauty, and they knew, somehow, that they would never forget this moment. This ordinary Thursday afternoon that had become something extraordinary. The music reached its darkest moment. The notes became heavy and slow. They pressed down like a weight on everyone's chest. Elena's body swayed with the rhythm. Her shoulders rose and fell. Her whole being was connected to the piano now. They were not separate anymore. They were one. Robert, the music teacher, recognized what was happening. The piece was entering its most emotional section. Chopin had written this part to express the deepest kind of sorrow, the kind of sorrow that has no words, the kind that can only be felt. Elena played each note like it was her last breath. She put everything she had into the keys. All her pain, all her memories, all the years she had spent hiding from herself. The crowd was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even the children stood still. They could feel that something sacred was happening, something that demanded respect. A man in a business suit wiped his eyes with his sleeve. He had not cried in years. He was the kind of person who kept his emotions locked away. But the music had found the key. It had opened the door he kept so carefully closed. Next to him, an elderly woman leaned on her walking stick and smiled through her tears. She understood what Elena was feeling. She had lived long enough to know that kind of pain. The pain of losing everything. The pain of starting over. The pain of carrying secrets that nobody else could understand. James, the young man who had given up his seat, stood frozen in place. He had forgotten about his train. He had forgotten about going home. Nothing else mattered except this moment. This music. This incredible woman who had appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. He thought about his own life. His boring job at the coffee shop. His small apartment. His dreams that seemed so far away. He had always wanted to do something meaningful, something that mattered, but he had been too afraid to try. Watching Elena, he felt something shift inside him. If this old woman could sit down at a piano after 40 years and play like this, then maybe anything was possible. Maybe it was never too late to follow your heart. Maybe fear was not a good enough reason to give up on your dreams. The music began to build again. The dark section was ending. Something new was coming. Elena's fingers started moving faster. The notes became brighter. There was hope now, rising through the sadness like the sun breaking through clouds. The crowd felt it too. The energy changed. People leaned forward. Hearts beat faster. Something was about to happen. Something big. Elena opened her eyes for the first time since she started playing. She looked at the keys. She looked at her hands. And she smiled. It was a small smile. A private smile. Like she was sharing a secret with herself. Her fingers exploded into movement. The music became a storm. Notes crashed and thundered. The piano seemed to shake with the power of the sound. It was loud and wild and absolutely beautiful. People in the crowd gasped. Some took steps backward. They had never heard anything like this. They did not know a piano could make sounds like this. They did not know that music could be so physical, so overwhelming, so alive. Elena's hands were a blur. They moved so fast that it was impossible to follow them. Up and down the keyboard. Left and right. High notes and low notes mixed together in a whirlwind of sound. Robert shook his head in amazement. He taught piano to students who practiced for hours every day. Even his best students could not play like this. Not even close. This woman was on another level entirely. This woman was a master. She's incredible, Robert said out loud. He was not talking to anyone in particular. He just needed to say it. He needed to speak the truth that everyone was witnessing. The young woman next to him nodded. "I've never seen anything like this," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I didn't even like classical music before. But this is different." Robert understood what she meant. This was not about liking or not liking classical music. This was about something deeper, something human. Elena was not just playing notes on a piano. She was telling the story of life itself. The struggle, the pain, the beauty, the hope. The music kept building. Higher and higher. Louder and louder. Elena's whole body was moving with the rhythm now. She was not sitting still anymore. She was dancing. Dancing on the piano bench. Dancing with her hands. Dancing with her heart. The crowd had grown to over 200 people now. They filled the entire area around Platform 3. Station staff had given up trying to keep order. They were watching too. Everyone was watching. Some people were holding hands. Strangers who did not know each other. They had come together because of the music. They were sharing this experience. This moment that would stay with them forever. A teenager named Marcus stood near the edge of the crowd. He had been having a terrible day. He had failed an exam at school. His girlfriend had broken up with him. His parents were fighting again. He had come to the station to take a train somewhere, anywhere, just to get away. But now he was not thinking about any of those things. He was not thinking about his problems. He was just listening, just feeling. The music was washing over him like a wave. It was cleaning something inside him, taking away some of the darkness. He did not understand classical music. He listened to hip-hop and rock. But this was different. This was not about genres or styles. This was about truth. And truth has no category. Truth speaks to everyone. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but they came anyway. He did not care anymore. Half the people around him were crying too. There was no shame in it. The music deserved tears. It demanded them. Elena was approaching the climax of the piece, the most difficult section, the part that even professional pianists feared. It required perfect technique and perfect emotion at the same time. It required everything a person had to give. Her fingers flew over the keys. The sound was massive. It filled the entire station. It echoed off the high glass ceiling. It traveled through the corridors and platforms. People on the other side of the building could hear it. They stopped what they were doing and listened. The piece demanded more and more. Elena gave more and more. She pushed her old body to its limits. Her arms were getting tired. Her back was aching. But she did not stop. She could not stop. Not now. Not after waiting 40 years for this moment. She thought about Chopin, the young Polish composer who had written this piece almost 200 years ago. He had poured his soul into these notes. He had written them while sick and lonely, far from his home. He had known pain. He had known loss. He had known what it meant to be separated from everything you loved. Elena felt connected to him across time. She understood him. She played for him. She played for all the people who had ever suffered, all the people who had ever lost something precious, all the people who had ever been afraid to start again. The music reached its highest point, the loudest moment, the most intense explosion of sound. Elena's fingers struck the keys with all her strength. The piano sang and roared and screamed all at once. And then, suddenly, the storm began to calm. The notes became softer, slower. The thunder faded. The rain stopped. What remained was something gentle, something tender, something like a prayer. Elena was breathing hard now. Her chest rose and fell with effort, but her fingers never stumbled. They knew exactly where to go. They played the quiet melody with perfect control. The crowd was still, completely still. People were holding their breath. They did not want to make a single sound. They did not want to break the spell. The piece was almost over now. Just a few more passages. Just a few more moments. Elena savored each note. She made each one count. After 40 years of silence, every sound was precious. The melody wound down like a music box running out of energy. Softer and softer. Slower and slower. The notes spread out. They hung in the air like stars appearing one by one in a night sky. And then came the final note. One single note. Low and deep and full of meaning. Elena pressed the key. She held it down. She let the sound fade naturally into the air. She let it die like the sun setting on the horizon. And then there was silence. Complete and total silence. Elena sat at the piano with her hands still resting on the keys. Her eyes were closed again. Tears were drying on her cheeks. Her body was still. Her heart was finally at peace. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. Then, from somewhere in the back of the crowd, someone started to clap. One person. Just one. Then another. And another. And another. The applause spread like fire. It grew louder and louder. People were not just clapping politely. They were clapping with everything they had. They were clapping like their lives depended on it. And then came the cheers. The shouts. The cries of joy and wonder and disbelief. The crowd erupted into a celebration unlike anything King's Cross Station had ever seen. The applause was deafening. It bounced off the walls and the ceiling. It filled every corner of the station. People were not just clapping. They were shouting and whistling and stamping their feet. They were releasing all the emotion that had built up inside them during the performance. Elena slowly lifted her hands from the keys. She opened her eyes and looked around. For a moment, she seemed confused, like she had woken up from a dream and did not know where she was. Then she saw the crowd. Hundreds of people, all looking at her, all clapping for her, all crying and smiling at the same time. Her hand went to her chest. She had not expected this. She had not expected anything like this. She had just wanted to play. She had just wanted to remember what it felt like. She had not thought about audiences or applause or attention, but here they were. All these strangers, all these people she had never met. And they were thanking her. They were celebrating her. They were telling her that what she had done mattered. Elena felt new tears forming in her eyes. But these were different tears. These were tears of gratitude, of joy, of something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. James pushed through the crowd to reach her. He stood in front of her with his mouth open, still unable to believe what he had witnessed. That was. He could not find the words. There were no words. Nothing in the English language was big enough to describe what had just happened. Elena smiled at him. The same mysterious smile she had given him before, but now it was brighter, warmer, like a door had been opened and light was finally coming through. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for letting me play." "Are you kidding?" James said. His voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you. That was the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Ever, in my whole life." The crowd was still applauding. Some people had started chanting. They wanted more. They wanted Elena to play another piece. They wanted this moment to last forever. But Elena shook her head gently. She was tired. So tired. Playing the ballade had taken everything she had. Her arms were aching. Her fingers were sore. Her heart was full, but her body was empty. She started to stand up from the bench. It was difficult. Her legs were weak and shaky. James quickly offered his hand to help her. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am fine," Elena said. "Just old. Very, very old." She laughed softly at her own joke. James laughed too, though his eyes were still wet with tears. The crowd began to move closer. People wanted to talk to her. They wanted to shake her hand. They wanted to know who she was and where she had come from. They wanted the story behind the music. A woman from the crowd stepped forward. She was holding a phone in her hand. The phone was still recording. "Excuse me," the woman said. Her name was Sarah, the young journalist who had been at the station for a different story. "My name is Sarah. I work for a news website. I've been recording your performance. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions?" Elena looked at the phone. She looked at Sarah. She looked at all the faces surrounding her, all waiting for answers. For a moment, she wanted to say no. She wanted to pick up her shopping bag and walk away. She wanted to go back to her quiet life. Her invisible life. The life where nobody asked questions and nobody expected anything. But then she thought about the music. She thought about how it had felt to play again. She thought about the connection she had made with all these strangers. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to tell her story. "Okay," Elena said quietly. "I will answer some questions." Sarah's eyes lit up with excitement. She had known this was a story. Now she would find out exactly what kind of story it was. "First, can you tell me your name?" Sarah asked. "My name is Elena. Elena Kowalska." Sarah typed the name into her phone. "And where are you from, Elena?" "Originally, I am from Warsaw, in Poland, but I have lived in London for many years now." "How many years?" Elena paused. She counted in her head. 43 years. I came here in 1983. Sarah nodded. She could tell there was more to the story. Much more. But she did not want to push too hard, too fast. "That was an incredible performance," Sarah said. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Elena smiled at the memory. "I started learning when I was 4 years old. My mother bought me a piano, an old, ugly piano, but I loved it. I practiced every day for hours and hours." "Did you have a teacher?" "Yes, Mr. Kowalski. He was very strict, very demanding, but also very kind. He taught me everything." Robert, the music teacher, had worked his way to the front of the crowd. He was listening to every word. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but that piece you played, the Chopin Ballade, number 1, that's one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. You played it perfectly, better than perfectly. I've been teaching music for 20 years, and I've never heard anything like that." Elena looked at Robert. She saw the respect in his eyes, the wonder, the genuine admiration. "Thank you," she said. "That is very kind of you to say." "It's not kindness," Robert said. "It's the truth. I have to ask, were you a professional pianist?" The crowd grew even quieter. Everyone leaned in to hear the answer. Elena took a deep breath. This was the question she had been avoiding for 40 years. This was the door she had kept locked and guarded. But now the door was open. There was no point in pretending anymore. "Yes," she said. "I was a concert pianist. In Poland. A long time ago." A murmur went through the crowd. People whispered to each other. They had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed was still shocking. "What happened?" Sarah asked gently. "Why did you stop?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. The memories were coming back again. But these were not the happy memories. These were the dark ones, the painful ones, the ones she had tried so hard to forget. "Life happened," she finally said. "Things changed in Poland. The government, the politics. It became difficult for artists, especially artists who did not agree with the system." She paused. Her voice became softer, sadder. "I was forced to leave, to run away. I lost everything. My career, my reputation, my home. I came to London with nothing. I had to start over. A new country, a new language, a new life." The crowd listened in complete silence. Some people had started crying again. The story was heartbreaking. This woman, this incredible musician, had lost everything and had to rebuild her life from nothing. "When I came here," Elena continued, I was nobody. I worked as a cleaning lady. I lived in a tiny room. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew what I had been. And I thought that was for the best. I thought the old Elena was gone. The pianist was dead. Only the cleaning lady remained. James felt his heart breaking. He thought about his own complaints, his boring job, his small apartment. They seemed so trivial now. This woman had faced real hardship, real loss, real suffering. But why did you stop playing? Sarah asked. Even if you had to work other jobs, you could have still played for yourself, for fun, for joy. Elena shook her head slowly. No, I could not. The music. The music was too connected to everything I had lost. Every time I heard a piano, I remembered. I remembered the concerts, the audiences, the applause. I remembered my mother, my teacher, my friends, all the people who were gone, all the things that would never come back. She wiped a tear from her cheek. Playing the piano was too painful, so I stopped. I told myself I would never play again, and I kept that promise for 40 years, until today. What changed? Sarah asked. What made you sit down and play today? Elena looked at James. She smiled at the young man who had been so kind to her. So welcoming. So open. He did, she said. This young man. He was playing the piano when I walked by, and something happened. Something inside me. I heard the music, and I felt like it was calling me. Like the piano was an old friend I had abandoned. And today, finally, I was ready to say hello again. James felt tears rolling down his cheeks. He had done nothing special. He had just played a simple pop song. But somehow, that simple act had changed everything. I am glad I played that song, he said. I am so glad you heard it. Elena reached out and took his hand. Her grip was weak but warm. Thank you, she said. Thank you for bringing me back to myself. The crowd burst into applause again. Not as loud as before, but just as meaningful. They were not clapping for a performance this time. They were clapping for a story, a life, a journey of loss and recovery. Sarah kept recording. She knew this story would touch millions of people around the world. But right now, in this moment, it was touching her. Personally, deeply. She thought about her own life, her own dreams, her own fears. She thought about all the things she had given up because they seemed too hard, too risky, too painful. And she wondered if maybe, like Elena, she could find her way back. The crowd did not want to leave. Even after Elena finished answering Sarah's questions, people stayed. They gathered in small groups, talking about what they had witnessed. Strangers exchanged phone numbers. They wanted to stay connected. They wanted to remember this day together. Elena sat on a bench near the piano. Her shopping bag was on her lap. The vegetables inside were probably getting warm by now. But she did not care. For the first time in 40 years, groceries were not the most important thing in her life. James sat next to her. He had completely forgotten about his train. He had forgotten about everything except this moment and this remarkable woman. Can I ask you something? He said. Elena nodded. Of course. When you were playing, where did you go? You closed your eyes and it was like you were somewhere else. Like you were not even here. Elena thought about the question. It was a good question, a deep question. I went home, she said softly. Back to Poland. Back to the concert halls where I used to play. Back to my mother's apartment where I learned my first notes. Back to all the places that exist only in my memory now. James nodded. He did not fully understand, but he wanted to. Do you miss it? He asked. Poland, I mean. Your old life. Elena was quiet for a moment. She looked at the piano across the station floor, the black and white keys that had just changed everything. I used to miss it so much that I thought I would die, she said. Every day I woke up and felt like a part of me was missing. Like someone had cut out my heart and left a hole in my chest. She paused. Her eyes became distant. But time passed. Years passed. The pain became smaller. Not gone, but smaller. I learned to live with the hole. I learned to build a new life around it. That sounds really hard, James said. It was. It is. But humans are strong. Stronger than we know. We can survive almost anything if we have to. Sarah, the journalist, was standing nearby. She was on her phone, talking quickly to her editor. Her voice was excited. Yes, I'm telling you, this is huge. She was a famous concert pianist in Poland. She hasn't played in 40 years. The whole station stopped to listen. I have it all on video. This is going to be massive. She hung up and walked over to Elena. Mrs. Kowalska, I just talked to my editor. He wants to run this story tonight. It's going to be on our website. Is that okay with you? Elena looked uncertain. She had lived in the shadows for so long. The idea of being in the spotlight again was frightening. I do not know, she said. I am just an old woman. Why would anyone care about my story? Sarah knelt down in front of her. She looked into Elena's eyes with sincere warmth. Because your story is beautiful, Sarah said. Because you lost everything and you survived. Because you sat down at a piano today and made hundreds of people cry. Because in a world full of bad news, people need stories like yours. Stories of hope. Stories of resilience. Stories that remind us what humans are capable of. Elena considered these words. She had never thought of her life as inspiring. She had always seen herself as a failure. Someone who had run away. Someone who had given up. Someone who had let fear win. But maybe that was not the whole truth. Maybe surviving was also a kind of victory. Maybe getting up every morning and facing another day was also a kind of courage. Okay, Elena finally said. You can share the story, if you think it will help someone. Sarah smiled broadly. Thank you. I promise I will tell it well. She stood up and started typing on her phone again. She had work to do, a story to write, a video to upload. The world was waiting. Robert, the music teacher, approached Elena next. He had been hanging back, not wanting to intrude, but he could not leave without saying something. Mrs. Kowalska, he said, I hope I'm not bothering you, but I had to tell you something. Please, call me Elena, and you are not bothering me. Robert took a deep breath. He was nervous. He felt like he was talking to royalty. I've been teaching music for 20 years, he said. I've met many talented people, but I have never in my entire career heard anyone play like you played today. You have a gift, a rare and precious gift. Elena smiled modestly. I am just old and stubborn. The gift belongs to Chopin. I am only the messenger. No, Robert said firmly. That's not true. Chopin wrote the notes, but you brought them to life. You gave them meaning. That's not just technique. That's art. That's soul. Elena did not know how to respond. She had received many compliments in her life, but they had stopped so long ago that she had forgotten what they felt like. Thank you, she said simply. That means more than you know. Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Elena. This is my contact information, he said. I teach at a music school in North London. We have a concert series every month. Local musicians, students, professionals. If you ever want to perform again, I would be honored to have you. Elena took the card. She looked at it for a long moment. A music school, a concert series, real audiences, real performances. It was terrifying, and exciting, and impossible, and maybe, just maybe, possible. I will think about it, she said. Robert nodded. He understood that this was not an easy decision. After 40 years of silence, you could not just jump back into the spotlight. It took time. It took courage. It took healing. No pressure, he said. The offer stands whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready. He shook her hand gently and walked away. He needed to get home. He needed to tell his wife what had happened. She would never believe it. The crowd was slowly starting to thin out. People were remembering their trains, their appointments, their lives. The magic was fading, but it was not gone. It lived on in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. James looked at his phone. He had missed 3 trains already. He would have to wait another hour for the next one. He did not mind at all. Elena, he said, can I buy you a cup of tea? There's a nice cafe just over there. You look like you could use a rest. Elena looked at the young man. This stranger who had shown her such kindness. This simple act of offering his piano bench had changed her life. That would be lovely, she said. But I am buying. You have given me enough today. James laughed. We can argue about the bill later. He helped her stand up from the bench. She was still shaky on her feet. The performance had taken a lot out of her, but she felt lighter somehow, like a weight she had been carrying for decades had finally been lifted. They walked slowly toward the cafe. People recognized Elena as they passed. They smiled at her. They nodded with respect. Some whispered to their companions, pointing at the old woman with the shopping bag. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just another face in the crowd. She was Elena Kowalska, concert pianist, survivor, the woman who had made a train station weep. And as she walked, she realized something surprising. She was not afraid anymore. The spotlight she had avoided for so long did not seem so terrifying now. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to live again. Really live. Not just survive. She did not know what the future would bring. She did not know if she would ever perform again. But for the first time in 40 years, she was open to the possibility. And that, she thought, was a kind of miracle all by itself. The cafe was warm and quiet. It was a small place with wooden tables and soft lighting. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods filled the air. Elena and James sat by the window, looking out at the busy station. A waitress brought them tea and 2 slices of cake. James had insisted on the cake. He said it was a celebration. Elena had smiled and agreed. "So," James said, stirring sugar into his tea, "what happens now? What are you going to do?" Elena wrapped her hands around her cup. The warmth felt good on her tired fingers. "I do not know," she admitted. "This morning, I woke up like every other morning. I made breakfast. I went to the market. I bought vegetables. I was planning to go home and make soup." She laughed softly at the simplicity of it. "And now?" James asked. "Now everything is different. I played the piano. People listened. A journalist is writing about me. A music teacher wants me to perform again." She shook her head in disbelief. "I do not understand how this happened. Maybe it was meant to happen," James said. "Maybe the universe was waiting for the right moment." Elena looked at him with curiosity. "You believe in such things? The universe? Fate?" James shrugged. "I don't know what I believe, but I believe that some things happen for a reason. You walked through the station at the exact moment I was playing. You asked about Chopin. I gave you the bench. It all feels like it was supposed to happen." Elena considered this. She had never been a religious person. She had seen too much suffering to believe in a kind and loving God. But she did believe in something. Call it fate. Call it chance. Call it the mystery of existence. Something had brought her to that piano today. "Maybe you are right," she said. "Maybe some things are meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Outside the window, the station continued its endless dance of arrivals and departures. Trains came and went. People rushed and waited. Life went on. "Can I tell you something?" James said. "Something personal?" "Of course." He looked down at his tea, gathering his thoughts. "I hate my job," he said. "I work at that coffee shop because I need money. But it's not what I want to do with my life. I want to make music. I want to write songs. I want to perform." Elena listened, without interrupting. "But I'm scared," James continued. "I'm scared of failing. I'm scared of trying and finding out I'm not good enough. So I just keep working at the coffee shop, day after day, year after year, waiting for something to change." He finally looked up at Elena. "And then today, I watched you. I watched a woman who lost everything, who gave up music for 40 years, sit down and play like an angel. And I thought, what's my excuse? What am I so afraid of? At least I haven't lost everything. At least I still have a chance." Elena reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "Fear is a powerful thing," she said. "It kept me from playing for 40 years. 40 years, James. That is almost 2 of your lifetimes. I let fear steal 40 years of music from me." She squeezed his hand gently. "Do not make my mistake. Do not let fear steal your dreams. You are young. You have time. You have possibilities. Use them. Chase your music. Even if you fail, at least you will know you tried." James felt tears welling up in his eyes again. This woman, this stranger he had met only a few hours ago, understood him better than his own family did. "Thank you," he said. "That means a lot." "I am only telling you what I wish someone had told me," Elena said. "When I was young, I was fearless. I played concerts in front of thousands of people. I competed against the best pianists in Europe. I was not afraid of anything." Her expression grew sad. "Then life happened. Hard things happened. and I became afraid. Afraid of losing more. Afraid of hoping and being disappointed. Afraid of trying and failing. So I hid. I made myself small. I made myself invisible. She released his hand and sat back in her chair. But today, something changed. When I sat down at that piano, I remembered who I used to be. I remembered the girl who was not afraid. And for 10 minutes, I was her again. I was Elena Kowalska, concert pianist. Not Elena Kowalska, cleaning lady. Not Elena Kowalska, invisible old woman. You were amazing, James said. I was myself, Elena corrected. For the first time in 40 years, I was truly myself. James nodded. He understood what she meant. There was a difference between existing and truly living, between going through the motions and being fully present, between hiding and being seen. So what now? He asked again. Will you play again? Elena looked out the window. The station was getting darker as the afternoon turned to evening. Lights were coming on. The glass ceiling reflected the glow from below. I do not know, she said honestly. Part of me wants to. Part of me felt so alive when I was playing. I had forgotten what that felt like. To be connected to something bigger than myself. To feel the music flowing through me like electricity. That sounds like a yes to me. But part of me is still scared, Elena continued. What if today was just luck? What if I try again and I fail? What if I cannot play like that anymore? James leaned forward. Elena, you hadn't played in 40 years. And you sat down and performed like a world-class musician. That wasn't luck. That was skill. That was talent. That was something that's inside you and can never be taken away. Elena smiled at his enthusiasm. It reminded her of herself when she was young. Full of fire. Full of belief. You sound very certain, she said. Because I am certain. I may not know much about classical music, but I know what I saw today. I know what I felt. And I know that you have something special. Something rare. Something the world needs to hear. Elena took a sip of her tea. It had grown cold, but she did not mind. The music teacher, she said. Robert. He gave me his card. He invited me to perform at his school. Are you going to do it? Elena pulled the card from her pocket. She looked at it again. The name, the address, the phone number. Such small things that could lead to such big changes. I think I might, she said slowly. Not right away. I need to practice. I need to prepare. But maybe in a few months. Maybe when I am ready. James grinned. That's great. That's really great. You must come, Elena said. If I perform, you must be there. You started all of this. You deserve to see where it leads. I wouldn't miss it for the world, James said. They finished their tea and cake. The cafe was getting busier now as the evening rush began. People stopping for coffee before catching their trains home. Elena gathered her shopping bag and stood up slowly. Her legs were still tired, but she felt stronger than before. The tea and the conversation had helped. Thank you, James, she said. For everything. For the piano. For the tea. For listening to an old woman's stories. Thank you, James replied. For reminding me what's possible. For showing me that it's never too late. They walked out of the cafe together. The station was loud and crowded again. The moment of magic from earlier seemed like a dream now. Just another Thursday evening in King's Cross. But Elena knew it was real. The music had been real. The tears had been real. The connection with hundreds of strangers had been real. And somewhere out there, Sarah the journalist was writing a story. A story that would soon change Elena's life in ways she could not yet imagine. James walked with Elena to the main entrance of the station. Outside, the London evening was cool and gray. Buses and taxis moved through the streets. People hurried in all directions. Can I call you a taxi? James asked. No, no, Elena said. I will take the bus. I have a pass. And I like watching the city through the window. Are you sure? I can wait with you. Elena smiled warmly. You have been too kind already. Go catch your train. Go home. Think about your music. And remember what I told you. James nodded. He wanted to hug her, but he was not sure if that was appropriate. She seemed to sense his hesitation. She opened her arms. They hugged in front of King's Cross station. A young man and an old woman. Two strangers who had become friends in the space of an afternoon. Take care of yourself, James said. You too, Elena replied. And chase your dreams. Promise me. I promise. She pulled back and looked at him one more time. Then she turned and walked toward the bus stop. Her steps were slow but steady. Her back was straighter than before. James watched her go until she disappeared into the crowd. Then he turned and went back into the station to catch his train. He had a lot to think about, a lot to process, a lot to decide. But one thing was certain. He would never forget this day. He would never forget Elena Kowalska. And he would never stop chasing his music. She had given him that gift. And he intended to honor it. The video went online at 9 o'clock that evening. Sarah had worked fast. She had edited the footage, written the story, and uploaded everything to her website before most of her colleagues had even left the office. The headline was simple but powerful. Elderly woman stuns train station with breathtaking piano performance. Her story will make you cry. At first, the response was slow. A few dozen views, a handful of comments. Nothing unusual for a Thursday night. But then something happened. Someone shared the video on social media. Then someone else shared it. Then 100 people shared it. Then 1,000. By midnight, the video had been viewed over 50,000 times. By morning, it had crossed 1 million. By the next evening, it was everywhere. News channels picked up the story. Television reporters talked about the mysterious old woman at King's Cross. Radio hosts played clips of the audio. Newspapers ran articles with titles like "The Ghost Pianist Returns" and "40 Years of Silence Broken by Chopin." Elena had no idea any of this was happening. She had gone home after leaving the station. She had made her soup. She had eaten alone at her small kitchen table. She had watched a little television, an old British comedy she liked, and then she had gone to bed. She slept better than she had in years, deep and dreamless. When she woke up the next morning, she felt something strange. She felt rested, peaceful, almost happy. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by her window. Her flat was on the 3rd floor of an old building in East London. The view was not beautiful, just rooftops and chimneys and a slice of gray sky. But she liked it. It was familiar. It was home. Her phone rang. It was an old phone, not a smartphone. Just a simple device for making calls. She rarely used it. No one ever called. She picked up cautiously. "Hello? Mrs. Kowalska? This is Sarah Chen, the journalist from yesterday. We spoke at the station." Elena remembered. The young woman with the phone. The one who had asked all the questions. "Yes, I remember. How are you?" "I'm good, actually. I'm great. Mrs. Kowalska, have you seen the news?" Elena frowned. "The news? No. I was sleeping." "Why?" There was a pause on the other end. "Mrs. Kowalska, the video of your performance has gone viral. It's been viewed over 2 million times. And it's still climbing." Elena did not understand. "Viral? What does that mean?" Sarah laughed softly. "It means everyone is watching it. Everyone is sharing it. You're famous, Mrs. Kowalska. The whole world is talking about you." Elena sat down heavily in her chair. Her legs felt weak. This was not possible. This could not be happening. "I do not understand," she said. "I am nobody. Just an old woman." "Not anymore," Sarah said. "You're a sensation. People are crying watching your video. They're sharing their own stories of loss and recovery. You've touched something deep in people. Something universal." Elena was silent. She did not know how to process this information. Her quiet, invisible life had suddenly been turned upside down. "What happens now?" she asked. "Well, that's why I'm calling. I've had dozens of requests. Journalists want to interview you. Television shows want you to appear. Concert halls have reached out asking if you would perform. Even some record labels have called." Elena's head was spinning. This was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. "I do not know," she said. "This is very sudden. I need time to think." "Of course," Sarah said kindly. "Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know what was happening, and to warn you that you might get some attention today. Reporters might come to your door. People might recognize you on the street." Elena looked out her window. The gray London morning suddenly seemed different, more exposed, more dangerous. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "I appreciate your kindness. Mrs. Kowalska, can I ask you one more thing?" "Yes? How do you feel? About all of this? About playing again after so long?" Elena thought about the question. She thought about yesterday. The piano, the music, the tears, the applause. The way her heart had felt so full it might burst. I feel, she started, then paused. I feel alive. For the first time in many years, I feel truly alive. There was warmth in Sarah's voice when she replied. I'm glad. You deserve to feel alive. You deserve all of this. Thank you for sharing your gift with the world. They hung up. Elena sat in her chair for a long time, staring at nothing. The world had changed overnight. Her world had changed. The phone rang again, and again, and again. Each time it was someone different. A reporter, a producer, a stranger who had somehow gotten her number. They all wanted something. Her time, her story, her talent. She stopped answering. She needed space. She needed quiet. She needed to figure out what she wanted. Around noon, there was a knock at her door. She approached carefully and looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway. She was holding flowers. Elena opened the door a crack. Mrs. Kowalska, the woman said. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a nervous smile. Yes, my name is Margaret. I live downstairs. We've never really talked, but I've lived below you for 12 years. She held out the flowers. I saw the video this morning. I just wanted to say, I had no idea. All these years, I had no idea who you were, what you had been through. Elena took the flowers. They were daffodils, bright yellow, like little pieces of sunshine. Thank you, Elena said. That is very thoughtful. I cried, Margaret admitted, watching you play. I cried like a baby. My husband thought something was wrong, but it wasn't sadness. It was, I don't know how to describe it. It was beautiful. Elena felt tears forming in her own eyes. This stranger, this neighbor she had barely noticed for 12 years, was standing here with flowers, telling her that her music had meant something. Would you like to come in? Elena asked. I can make tea. Margaret's face lit up. I would love that. If it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all. Elena opened the door wider and welcomed her neighbor inside. It was the first time in many years that she had invited anyone into her home. The first time she had shared tea with a friend. They sat in Elena's small living room and talked for 2 hours. Margaret told Elena about her own life, her children who had grown up and moved away, her husband who was sick, her struggles and her joys, and Elena found herself opening up too. She talked about Poland, about her career, about the day she left everything behind, about the years of silence and invisibility. It felt good to talk. It felt good to connect. It felt good to be seen. By the time Margaret left, Elena understood something important. The video, the fame, the attention, those things did not matter by themselves. What mattered was this: human connection, sharing stories, being honest about who you were. The music had opened a door, and people were walking through it. Strangers were becoming friends. Invisible people were becoming visible. Elena looked at the daffodils on her table, yellow like hope, yellow like sunshine breaking through clouds. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe this was her second chance. Not just to play music, but to live. Really live. With openness and courage and connection. She picked up Robert's card again. The music teacher. The concert series. The invitation to perform. She took a deep breath and reached for her phone. It was time to stop hiding. It was time to step into the light. 3 months passed. Spring arrived in London with its usual mix of rain and pale sunshine. The trees in the parks grew green again. Flowers appeared in window boxes and gardens. The city felt lighter somehow, more hopeful. Elena had changed too. The frightened, invisible woman from the train station was gone. In her place was someone different, someone braver, someone ready to face the world. She had accepted Robert's invitation. She would perform at his music school in 2 weeks. It would be her first real concert in over 4 decades. The thought still terrified her, but she had learned something important. Courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was doing the thing that scared you anyway. For 3 months, she had been practicing. Every day, for hours and hours. Robert had found her a piano to use, an old grand piano at the school, in a room that was usually empty in the afternoons. She went there 6 days a week. She played until her fingers ached and her back hurt and her eyes could barely stay open. At first, it had been difficult. Her muscles had forgotten their old strength. Her fingers had lost their speed. There were passages she used to play easily that now felt impossible. She had cried many times, tears of frustration, tears of doubt, tears of grief for all the years she had lost. But slowly, day by day, it came back. The muscle memory, the technique, the connection between her heart and her hands. Playing piano was like riding a bicycle, people said. You never really forgot. And they were right. Now, 2 weeks before the concert, Elena was ready. Not perfect, never perfect, but ready. She was sitting in the practice room at Robert's school. The afternoon light came through the tall windows. Dust floated in the beams of sunshine. The old piano stood in front of her, patient and waiting. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Elena said. Robert entered. He was carrying 2 cups of tea. He had become a friend over the past 3 months, a supporter, a believer. "How's it going?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Good, I think. The Chopin is strong. The Beethoven needs more work." Robert smiled. "You say that every day. And every day you play it beautifully." Elena accepted the compliment with a small nod. She was learning to do that, to accept kindness without pushing it away. It was harder than it sounded. "Are you nervous?" Robert asked. "About the concert?" Elena thought about the question. "Yes, very nervous, but also excited." "Is that strange?" "Not at all. That's exactly how you should feel. The greatest performers I've ever met all felt the same way, nervous and excited. It means you care." They sipped their tea in comfortable silence. Outside, birds were singing. Inside, the piano waited. "Can I tell you something?" Robert said after a while. "Of course. When you first sat down at that piano in the train station, I thought I was dreaming. I've been teaching music my whole adult life. I've heard thousands of students play, but I had never heard anything like that. It was like the piano came alive." Elena smiled at the memory. "I felt alive too, for the first time in so long. And these past 3 months, watching you practice, watching you prepare. It's been an honor. Truly, you have a gift that can't be taught. It just exists inside you, and I'm so glad you decided to share it again." Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest. This man, this kind teacher, had given her so much. A place to practice, encouragement when she doubted herself, belief when she had none. "Thank you, Robert, for everything. I could not have done this without you. You would have found a way," he said. "People like you always do." Elena was not so sure about that, but she appreciated his confidence. "The venue is ready," Robert continued. "We've sold all the tickets. Actually, we had to add extra seats, and then those sold out too. People are very excited." Elena felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. All those people, all those expectations. What if she failed? What if she disappointed them? Robert seemed to read her thoughts. "Elena, I've seen you play. I've heard you practice for 3 months. You are not going to disappoint anyone. You are going to give them the performance of a lifetime. You sound very certain." "Because I am certain. Just like that young man at the train station. What was his name? James? Right. James. Is he coming to the concert?" Elena nodded. "Yes. I called him last week. He said he would not miss it for anything." "Good. He should be there. He started all of this." Elena smiled. She had thought about James often over the past 3 months. She wondered how he was doing. If he was still working at the coffee shop. If he was still dreaming about making music. She would find out soon. "I should get back to practicing," Elena said, setting down her tea. "The Beethoven is not going to learn itself." Robert laughed. "All right. I'll leave you to it. But don't overdo it. You need to rest too. Take care of those hands." He left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Elena turned back to the piano. She flexed her fingers, stretched her wrists, took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The music filled the room. Beethoven's Sonata in C minor. A dark, powerful piece, full of struggle and determination, full of the refusal to surrender. Elena had chosen this piece carefully. It spoke to her. It told the story of someone fighting against impossible odds, someone who would not give up. someone who found light in the darkness. It was her story. It was everyone's story. As she played, she thought about all the people who would be in the audience in 2 weeks. Strangers who had watched her video, neighbors who had never noticed her before, friends she had made along the way. She thought about Margaret, her downstairs neighbor, who had become a regular visitor for tea. About Sarah, the journalist, who had told her story to the world. About Robert, who had believed in her when she did not believe in herself. And she thought about James, the young man at the piano, the one who had offered her a seat and changed her life. She hoped he was chasing his dreams. She hoped he was making music. She hoped he had not let fear win. The Beethoven reached its powerful conclusion. Elena struck the final chords with all her strength. The sound rang through the room, then slowly faded. She sat in the silence that followed. Her heart was beating fast. Her fingers were tingling. Her soul was full. This was why she played. Not for fame, not for applause, not for money or recognition. She played because music was the truest language she knew, the only language that could express the things that words could not, the joy and the sorrow, the hope and the despair, the whole beautiful, terrible, wonderful experience of being human. And in 2 weeks, she would speak that language again, in front of hundreds of people, in a real concert hall. After 40 years of silence, she was ready. She was finally, completely ready. The night of the concert arrived. The sky over London was clear and full of stars, a rare thing in this city of lights and clouds. The concert hall at Robert's school was small but beautiful. Red velvet seats, wooden walls that glowed warm in the lamplight, a polished black grand piano standing proudly on stage. Every seat was filled. 300 people sat in hushed anticipation. They had come from all over the city. Some had come from other countries. They had seen the video. They had read the story. And they wanted to witness the miracle for themselves. Elena stood backstage, hidden by a heavy curtain. She was wearing a simple black dress. Her white hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. Her hands were trembling slightly at her sides. Robert stood beside her. He was smiling, calm, steady. "How do you feel?" he asked. Elena laughed nervously. "Like I might throw up. That's normal. Every great performer feels that way before they go on. I am not sure I am a great performer anymore." Robert took her hands in his. He looked into her eyes with complete sincerity. "Elena, you are one of the greatest performers I have ever known. And tonight, everyone in that hall is going to know it too. Trust yourself. Trust your hands. Trust the music." Elena took a deep breath, then another. She closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing heart. She thought about her mother, the woman who had saved money for months to buy that old, ugly piano, the woman who had believed in her daughter's talent before anyone else. She thought about Mr. Kowalski, her strict, kind teacher, the man who had shaped her into an artist, who had taught her that music was not just about notes on a page, it was about truth. She thought about all the people who had helped her get to this moment. Sarah, Margaret, Robert, James, strangers, and friends, each one a thread in the tapestry of her return. "I am ready," she said. Robert nodded. "I know you are." He walked onto the stage. The audience quieted. Elena could hear him speaking through the curtain. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. What you are about to witness is something truly special. A musician who was once one of the finest concert pianists in Europe, who lost everything and rebuilt her life from nothing, who stayed silent for 40 years, and who, one ordinary day in a train station, found her voice again." Elena felt tears in her eyes. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of wonder, of joy. "Please welcome to the stage, Mrs. Elena Kowalska." The curtain opened. The lights were bright. The audience rose to their feet. Elena walked onto the stage. Her steps were slow but sure. Her head was held high. She looked out at the crowd, all those faces, all those eyes, all those hearts waiting for her music. She saw Margaret in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She saw Sarah a few rows back, already recording on her phone. She saw Robert standing by the side of the stage, beaming with pride. And she saw James. He was sitting near the middle, with a young woman beside him. He was smiling so wide it looked like his face might split open. He gave her a small wave. She nodded in return. She walked to the piano and sat down on the bench. The audience sat down too. Silence fell over the hall. Complete and total silence. Elena placed her hands on the keys. She felt the cool ivory beneath her fingers. She felt the familiar weight of the instrument before her. She felt the presence of every person in the room. Waiting, hoping, believing. She began to play. The first piece was the Beethoven, the Sonata in C minor. She had practiced it 1,000 times, but tonight it was different. Tonight it was alive. The notes flowed from her fingers like water from a spring. Natural, effortless, true. The audience was spellbound. No one moved. No one breathed. They were transported by the music to a place beyond the everyday world, a place where pain became beauty, where struggle became triumph, where silence became song. When the Beethoven ended, the applause was thunderous. People jumped to their feet. They shouted and cheered. They wiped away tears. Elena smiled and bowed. She felt light, weightless, free. She played more pieces. A gentle Debussy, a passionate Liszt, a delicate Mozart. Each one was a conversation with the audience, a sharing of her soul. And then, for her final piece, she played Chopin, the Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the piece that had started everything, the piece that had broken her silence in a busy train station 3 months ago. As she played, she remembered. She remembered her mother's face, her teacher's voice, the concert halls of her youth, the fear of her escape, the loneliness of her new life, the long, quiet years of hiding. And she remembered that day at King's Cross, the young man at the piano, the simple question about Chopin. The moment she decided to sit down and play, that moment had changed everything. That moment had brought her here, to this stage, to this music, to this second chance at life. The ballade built to its climax. Elena poured everything she had into the keys, all her love, all her loss, all her hope, all her gratitude. The final notes rang out. Then silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. The audience sat frozen. The music hung in the air like smoke after fireworks. Then the hall exploded. The applause was deafening. People stood on their feet. They stamped and shouted and cried. Flowers appeared from nowhere. Someone threw roses onto the stage. Elena stood up from the piano. She turned to face the audience. Her cheeks were wet with tears. Her heart was overflowing. She bowed deeply. Once, twice, 3 times. The applause continued. It seemed like it would never stop. James pushed his way to the front of the crowd. He was crying openly. He did not care who saw. "You did it," he shouted over the noise. "You did it, Elena." Elena reached down and took his hand. "No," she said. "We did it. Together." Later that night, after the crowd had gone and the hall was empty, Elena sat alone on the stage. The piano stood silent beside her. The roses lay scattered at her feet. Robert found her there. "Shouldn't you be celebrating?" he asked. Elena smiled. "I am celebrating, in my own way." He sat down next to her. "How do you feel?" Elena thought about the question. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. The pain and the joy, the loss and the recovery, the silence and the music. "I feel complete," she said. "For the first time in my life, I feel truly complete." Robert nodded. He understood. They sat together in comfortable silence, looking out at the empty hall. The seats where hundreds of people had sat. The space where music had filled the air. "What happens now?" Robert asked. Elena laughed softly. "I do not know. More concerts, maybe. More music. More life." She looked at her hands. Old hands. Wrinkled hands. Hands that had been silent for 40 years and had found their voice again. "But whatever happens," she continued, "I will not hide anymore. I will not be invisible. I will live fully, openly, bravely." She stood up and walked to the piano one last time. She touched the keys gently. A lover's touch. "Thank you," she whispered. To the piano, to the music, to whatever force in the universe had brought her to that train station on that ordinary Thursday afternoon. She had made a simple request. To play one piece of music on a public piano, and the crowd had not been ready. But they had listened anyway. They had opened their hearts. They had allowed themselves to be moved. That was the power of music. The power of truth. The power of one person finding the courage to be themselves. Elena walked off the stage and into the cool night air. The stars were still shining above London. The city hummed with life. She was 78 years old. She had lost everything once, and she had found it all again. Her story was not over. It was just beginning. And somewhere in the distance, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the music playing.